Yeah. Ah, wala ka ng dependent. Okay, wala na yun.
Hello.
Oo, yan lang. Oh. Tapos, yan lang yata. Oo, yan. Isang form lang ito. And then, ipadala mo din sa New York.
I do.
I am now unmuted.
Hello, everyone. I just joined.
The early birds are here.
I gotta turn the volume down. I've got the bylaws meeting.
I thought that it was
It's got a
changed.
bylaws meeting, you know.
Listen, I thought it was changed to 6 o'clock. Did I read something wrong?
No, you did not read anything wrong. There had been originally an executive committee meeting scheduled for 6:30, was canceled, but I was not going to change this. I know Katie has a later meeting, which is probably why we picked the 5:30. And yeah, not at the last minute. Get it out of the way.
I agree. Good to see. And I know Dave wants it at the same time. Hi, Dave. We were just talking about you.
So everybody's here. And Kristen did say that she would be joining late. But so we're waiting for Matt and Patricia.
Quiet.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I got a message that the host wanted me to unmute. Thank you, Susan, for sending that. Messages come from above in this system.
How's everybody doing?
David, I was just on a Zoom call, setting up a Zoom call for my daughter's baby shower on Saturday. Like, a Zoom call to do a Zoom call. It's ridiculous. It's like meta. You know what I mean?
Susan and I want to come to the baby shower. Can you link us in?
We'll squeeze you in. There are 64 people that are going to be on this Zoom.
We don't mind. You know.
Yes.
Susan and
Well,
I.
in any case, congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
You know, that's the good thing. You just take up a little more space on the screen. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Well, we can fit you in. This is what you have to come. You have to come with advice for a first-time mother. That's the key to getting into this baby shower.
Oh yeah. Dave and I are full of that kind of advice. Yeah.
I'm laughing about that. That's pretty funny.
What did you say? We have to bring a gift?
No, you have to bring advice. Advice for a young mother.
Do that to your daughter?
Yeah.
She's the one who
I don't know about Susan, but I have no advice.
The best advice is sleep when the baby sleeps and eat when the baby eats, because you're down to basics.
Where's Carter?
I'm going to go get a hard candy. Oh my gosh. Okay, Susan, who else are we expecting at this meeting? Who else?
We're missing Matt and we're missing Patricia. Kristen said that she's still working, so if she joins us, it will be a little later.
Okay. Well, thank you for backing me up on that comment last night about the lying, Susan.
Oh yeah, I heard that. I didn't want to jump in, in the moment when he said it, but I'm really glad that you brought it up. I've got to say, the person who made that comment himself turned out to be somewhat shady because he was not candid about his role and his relationships. And I think it is important that, if they don't lay it over and we have a reso, that gets brought up. Because people present themselves. I mean, it just amazes me that they present themselves as though we're some sort of novices, Like
David, this is a person who said he was a friend of the applicant, but then he was really undermining the application with a friend like that.
I think there was a comment in the chat. He's the property manager.
I know. Are we being recorded, Carter?
We are being recorded.
Okay.
I see that. I always assume I'm being recorded, so I'm careful about what I say.
You know, I like these guys that need a 4 a.m. license because they're going to stay open late for some of the restaurant workers to come in after their shift and have, I mean, as if, and they say it as if it's the first time the community board has ever heard that argument. It's like, okay, very good, great. We have more people asking for that license than there are restaurant workers.
You know, it would be nice if some of these applicants did a little homework with regards to us so that they knew their audience,
Good idea.
because I think it might actually affect, you know, the presentation.
Hey,
But
Yeah.
welcome, Patricia.
Miss Gloria, how are you?
Oh, hello.
Oh, hello.
Okay.
Let's see, it's 5:06, so I assume, I don't want to, because I don't want this to run too long. We are, and I'm sure Matt will join in any minute, but we're moving on to our new topic, which is public members. And as you know, as our bylaws don't make, they go in, they only have limited detail on them. And there's, not much talked about them. And basically that the only real limitation has to do with the number you can have on a committee. But there's a lot to talk about here, both in terms of, I mean, it's good. I personally, I sit on one committee, which does have a number of them. I'd love to hear what people think about these things, where they think are the specific, subtopics that we should be dealing with. I'd also like to remind people that this will become, I think, increasingly an important subject because since we face term limits, that it's something that we want to deal with in terms of a mechanism for protecting institutional knowledge.
Yes.
So if anybody would like to share with
I have a question, Susan. Which committee that you sit on has a lot of public members?
Joe Gallagher's
Quality of life.
Quality of life. Thank you. Quality of life. Duh. Yes, we have a lot, and many times I find that, in fact, a majority of, sometimes board members don't show up, and I've been at meetings where a majority of those present are public members.
Yeah.
Now, don't technically have a quorum unless a majority of the our board members are present. But nevertheless, when you hear an application, because when you have a committee like that and they're hearing applications and they're time sensitive, we are, therefore.
So Susan, that raises a very important issue about what constitutes a quorum. I've heard different arguments in different community boards. Do the public members plus the full members constitute a quorum, or is it only the board members who constitute a quorum, number one? And then number two, when it comes to the vote, do we in fact count, because I think we do, the public members in with the board members indiscriminately? I think we need to address that somehow in our discussion tonight.
Oh, absolutely. When it comes, yes, of course, public members have a vote in a committee, and they have a vote. Each person has a vote that counts the same, whether or not you separate them out. I don't think the bylaws actually distinguish whether or not you separate out the public from the appointed members. Some committees, I know, at least in the past, have done that. They've actually listed them as distinct.
They've separated the vote, yeah.
It's important, but in terms of quorum, I was looking at them earlier today. We do require that the quorum is based on the presence of board members, not public members. Maybe that needs to be made clearer.
I think that needs to be made clearer because
I
didn't find it. I'm
There
sorry,
shall be a-
Katie. I did not find that language, Susan, so I think it needs to be made clearer.
Okay, Katie, I'm
That the
sorry, go
quorum is
ahead.
only board members.
Yes,
Um,
D, section D4, Roman numeral 4.
That's right,
So
that's
shall be
what I
a
was
quorum
about to
only
say.
when a majority of the board members on the committee are present.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's
Good.
pretty clear. And then to 6,
Yeah.
there, committee shall keep attendance records and shall report the votes on all resolutions to the full board, together with separate tallies of board members and public members. I think that was an issue 1 or 2 revisions ago, because I remember
It's an
going through
issue
this
that we
before.
looked at years ago, if you recall.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it was
Susan,
a problem. It was a problem.
maybe we should put in there just for clarity, just put in full board members and add the
Yes,
word full.
I remember,
Okay.
I will
What are the
say, I
members of?
remember when Katie and I were involved with this in a previous iteration, but that's what, in the sense that the language may need to be beefed up so that it's unambiguous.
No, this was a while ago. Actually, I was chair at the time, and we had
Yeah.
those bylaw committee.
So in 4 and
Long time.
5, in D4 and 5, if we add full board members, I think that would allow for a cleaner reading if people are looking to understand.
Right.
And I think in 4, we should capitalize board, the word board. I know it sounds little, but it's capitalized everywhere
It's
else
not,
and with
it's
the
a
full board.
it's a defined term. I've always been using it. If you've noticed, everything I send out, I capitalize board because it's a defined term and we're referring to ourselves. And it is those kind of things. Absolutely. We can always we can catch those, especially if I circulate a draft, and but more in terms of conceptually, do we feel that basically what we've got right now captures that?
Yeah, I mean, there was
Well,
go ahead, Katie, go ahead.
I just want to know how many public members do we have now, Carter? Because
I have not appointed any this year while we're on Zoom, but that's possibly going to change. I may make an exception because we have so much a high turnout on all of our committee meetings that it gets to be a little too unwieldy. But let me see, I just got it up, but now let me
Who would
find
think less than 10?
I can't find the page. Let's see.
Coming back to that.
Okay.
There we go.
Schools and Education has 1.
Land use
member.
doesn't have any now.
So I've got
Yes,
1,
related.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
You've got
10,
at least 3
11,
on quality of life.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18,
Yeah.
19.
Wow,
So we have 19,
Wow.
19 public
See?
members.
wow.
But they're not evenly distributed in terms of it. There are committees that don't have any.
Yeah, so one of the issues with the public members, just to back up a little bit, is that public members are not subject to conflict of interest board, COIB, because it's only full board members who are appointed by the borough president, which is all of us. Ultimately, the borough president appoints everybody, and half of the appointees are with recommendations from city council members. But we're the only ones who are subject to the conflict of interest board mandates. And so since I've been on the board, there's always been concern in certain committees that, nobody wants to not have that because of the potential conflicts that could be there. And so that's sort of been this underwriting current, is how do we address that in the bylaws? And so it may be that we ask people to affirm something, that they will follow those, to actively take some step, or if we put together something, because that's a big issue
Well, on the SLA committee, it certainly is.
Well, and that's why I've always been very hesitant to have public members on the SLA committee, is because of some of those concerns. You know.
Well, we always have the right to ask if a public member, as a condition of being appointed, that they agree to abide by it. We may not be able to enforce them against a public member the way we would, that they can be enforced against us, but we have the right to say, these are the rules that we function by. We ask you, as a condition of being appointed, that you accept them. And that if we find that you violated them, that we will terminate your service.
I don't know enough about this topic per se to, if we don't ask that, I don't know if people are able to just conceal it and they don't have to disclose anything to us. So my concern is that if they actively have to do something, I think we're in a good place. Because then the burden is that, yes, if you had this same type of conflict a board member might have, that you do have to disclose it. And
Absolutely.
And if we actively ask them to agree to that, then we don't need to worry because they're going against something if they do that. But if we don't ask that, those conflicts, they're not required to disclose, presumably, if they have a conflict. And it's not so much that their vote can carry a situation as that they are discussing the matter without disclosing the conflict. It's
Well,
not.
it also hurts us. It hurts.
It does, but I'm just saying that they're able to influence a matter
Sure.
without disclosing their inherent conflict, whereas every board member is required to disclose that conflict.
Right.
That's why, off the topic, that's why I feel that the way it works now is if you have a conflict of interest, you can't vote, but you could discuss it. I always think that you shouldn't be able to discuss it. I think it's totally inappropriate.
Well, that's not up to us to.
No, I
Right.
understand.
The rules are the
Certainly not
rules
this
in
committee.
terms of what we must reveal and when we have to recuse ourselves.
So
Well, can
So-
we look
so
at the
number-
bylaws themselves
yeah,
for a
so
minute?
number 3 already says that.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say.
We might want to say the public members shall be governed by the same. We might want to say that they affirm or have something. I mean, I don't know how to do that. You're the attorney, Susan, not me. So I don't know how you switch something where somebody has to actively say yes, or is a condition, right?
Well, that's one
We
of it.
could
First
put the
of all,
condition in the bylaws, right?
we can strengthen this language to make it an affirmative, in the sense of it is a condition upon being appointed as a public member. And we can also have a separate statement and affirmation where a public member has to formally, like, even, you print out, these are the rules, and you are agreeing to this, and you sign it. And it's like, this is a contract between the individual and the community board. And if they break the rules, then the chair can terminate this person, and that's it.
Sounds good.
And in fact, I think the idea of having them laid out emphasizes for public members that we take this very seriously, and it enhances the confidence that anyone who comes before the board, particularly with an application, knows that everybody who's sitting there listening to an application is operating under the same set of rules.
I like that.
So that's, I don't see any problem with that. This is purely voluntary, and, somebody wants to serve, we're not creating a higher standard. So, and we're not exposing them to any of the penalties that we would be subject to were we to violate the rules. Yeah. It's simply a condition of service. So,
okay, that sounds very good, Susan.
Yeah, I agree. And then number 4, just, do you need to strengthen that language? Public members may be removed by the chair at his or her sole discretion after consultation with respective chair, committee chair.
Well,
Did you ever have to
That's too
remove
ambiguous?
someone, David?
No. But it was always in consultation. If I appointed some public members, but it always had to have the concurrence of the committee chair.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
It
never.
doesn't mean they have to agree. You just have to confer with them. That's all it says.
right.
Well,
Right.
if you didn't agree, I wouldn't do it.
I mean, not that I think most chairs wouldn't, but that's important because, if somebody, because there's not sort of a similar process of that person coming onto the board, we may not know that person as well, but may, because of something that's presented to us, appoint them to a committee. But then if there's behavior, right, that's not acceptable.
Inappropriate, but
one of the important points is the congeniality, right? If that's a very important to us working together. And if somebody comes in and is disruptive in a fashion, is not working well with other board members, you want to just to be able to stop that. We've all seen that over time, or not all of us, some of us, with different personality conflicts, and you certainly don't want to introduce that with a public member, to the workings of our time,
Right. At the same time, we don't want to create the impression that there's some, a person is simply removed. The idea of consulting makes it clear that if the chair recognizes, or a committee chair recognizes a problem and brings that concern to the chair, that it's being dealt with, for the good of the committee, not just because, I personally don't like this person. You don't want it to, you want to have, in a way, this almost like a witness to this process. So that it's not,
well, there used to be a requirement, I don't know if it's still there, that prospective public member had to attend 3 meetings of the committee they wanted to be appointed to. Do we still have that requirement? I think that was a little outrageous, actually.
I think that that's actually a very good requirement, because many of the people who submit, with different applications, they haven't really participated. And it's not hard, right, to go and come to 3 different committee meetings if you're interested in it, if you want to have somebody.
the least you can expect.
Right. And so, but at the same time, the flip side is that can be used or construed as, if you do that, then this happens.
Okay.
So there's a balancing act in that, but it is a good threshold of, we won't even consider you unless you've been to the meetings.
Okay,
Well,
I just don't want to get off the fact that these are good things to talk about, but this has to do with creating sort of like a set of like pre-qualifications. I don't know that this is a bylaws thing.
Okay,
This is
fair enough.
more of, in the sense that there were certain, someone has to have attended a certain number of meetings within a certain time frame. I don't know if you want to, a recommendation, in the sense of this person has to get the support of the committee chair, let's say, I'd like to, this person is applying and I support their application type thing. Whatever those are great. Those are not bylaws things. And we certainly can talk about them because we talk about things that are a little beyond the scope of the bylaws.
Can I just say, I kind of disagree with you, Carter, making that like the 3 meetings, because I remember we've had some very excellent public members. That I'm thinking about the guy at Landmarks who was a sort of a Landmarks expert. Do you remember his name?
Oh, yeah, Andrew Jones.
Yeah.
Very good, Katie. So, Andrew Jones, and if there was an Andrew Jones that showed up and said, here's what I do for a living, and here's, what I like to contribute. I'm on the faculty of Columbia and the land use division. I think I was, as a chair, would appoint them without having them go for 3 months to meetings. But I think
That's not the norm.
You know, there's always a look.
We're here
You
to
always
talk-
have a
We're
list
here to talk
of,
about not the norms, you know. But,
well,
but
none
the
of
chair of the community
exceptional.
board,
None of us are the norm, right?
chair of the community board could waiver that requirement in my
That's
mind.
right. Yeah, well,
These
that's
are
Susan's
guidelines,
point that we don't
David,
put
you
that in
I
there.
understand. I'm just. as long
Which
as
is
it's-
also why these are not bylaws things. These, you know, creating a list of, or, you know, a recommended profile for when you're considering somebody as a public member, it's like, yes, if somebody is bringing a wealth of experience, it's a trade-off. If somebody was a former board member and now they're, you know, it's like, again, they're demonstrating it in other ways. But these are the, you know, this is something that, you know, we can talk about this, but I don't want to get off, you know, in terms of the bigger issue in terms of, you know, how many, you know, do we want, for example, do we want to encourage public members on, assuming that they you know, they do adhere to our rules, conflict of interest. Do we want to have them, more of them on all of our committees because of what they bring to, or do we want to limit the numbers, maybe, you know, so that the idea of having too many, you know, situations where there are more public members than board members doesn't occur? And do we need more of a mechanism in the sense that, you know, people get moved around, but we don't necessarily move around the public members the way sometimes board members get moved from committee to committee?
That's true.
Susan,
How many
Susan, I have a
people are
question.
waiting?
Is there a limit of one public member only to be appointed to the board, to one committee, or do we allow more than one?
No. We have.
No.
Say
Our
half.
Our
One less
bylaws
than
say
half.
you cannot have more than 50%, public members cannot be more than 50% of the number of full board. So if you have a committee with 9 members, you can have up to 4 additional public members.
But my question was, can a public member serve on more than one committee? I wasn't being clear.
I don't know. There's no restriction on that.
No
to my
restriction. Hmm?
So
Would you
And
want
that
to-
may be something, that's another good point to bring up in terms of a list of policies, in terms of, do you want to create a limit like that? Do you, you know, or whatever, depends on, you know.
You know, I don't think
Well-
it's an issue. And if you create a limit, I think it's more likely to harm than hurt if you've got, you know, something that comes up, because, you know, frankly, it's just not really an issue. The issue is more the committees become unwieldy to run and manage when they get too big, whether that's on Zoom or in person. And that's more of a concern in the style of the way our board has run, you know, you know, that we've tried to keep the numbers of the committee members down to 9 or 10 people. And, you know, a few public members on some of the committees. The only reason that the Quality of Life Committee has so many public members is because
We merged it.
the history that it used to be the Environment Committee,
We
and,
merged the committee.
you know, before it was merged, and most of those public members were the public members from the Environment Committee
Wound up on quality of life.
Right.
who wound up on Quality of Life and Environment. So, and most of them, it's, you know, they are long time serving public members of the board. So it's,
But Susan brought up an interesting point. As term limits kick in 3 or 4 years, you know, I can imagine we might want to keep some
right.
former board members in. We were talking about institutional memories of former board members in as a public member. So, you know, we have to be conscious of that when we're talking about guidelines and hard numbers, you know.
Right.
So,
And that's an interesting point too. You know, it's not dissimilar to, you know, the, you know, do you guys think that it would be prudent to include in the bylaws certain eligibilities for a public member that are at some higher level or exceptions or something, and it would not be dissimilar, and this is in the idea of term limits, and this is not dissimilar of what we would need to discuss on the executive committee, right? Is that, could you have a immediate past chair who's no longer a full board member, which is real with term limits, have them as a public member on the executive committee, and it would be the same as having a past chair of a committee who's no longer a full board member being able to automatically serve in some, as a capacity as a public member for an additional year, for example, after the fact. And that's for continuity and institutional memory. And do you want to put that in so that it's not subjective to a committee chair's, or excuse me, a board chair's discretion?
I don't know. Right.
And I just bring that up because that's an institutional memory aspect. And, there were some really interesting, very political fights recently in some other boards in their elections and actions about removing people and doing things that people who are running for office wanted to do. And, and so that's with term limits, it becomes very real of just.
You're making it's a very valid and important point in terms of, say, a past chair, but I don't, we're public members. To my understanding, we're talking about standing committees, and that in the sense of they're not, the executive committee is comprised of, it's sort of its membership is defined. If we want to protect our institutional knowledge by ensuring that former chairs have a role, I think that may be something we address in a separate area. In the sense of we have a section which talks about our chair, and that may be the place where we talk about giving that chair.
No, I understand. I was saying with committee chairs, because with committee chairs, let's say you had a committee of 10 people and you have 5 public members, and your term limit ends. The public members have no term limits.
Right. Those
5 members are still there. You can't add a public member without taking somebody off.
No, but
so you're basically just creating a.
What we can do is create a hierarchy that says that.
It's just a thought.
Huh?
It's just a thought. It's thinking for the future in a way that allows for some continuity and a smoother change. So I'll give an example. I recently found out that any former president of the country is eligible to have, national security briefs on an ongoing basis forever. And that's because they're a past president, and, they should always be in a position to comment on, things that are happening in the world, and also to be a resource for any current president if something happened under their own administration in the past, and it's just interesting because I'd never thought about that. But of course, now what is the outgoing president get?
Everything's new.
Came up in something, I was just curious about and read about it.
That's discretionary. It's not like mandated.
No, it is. It is mandated that
I don't think so.
past presidents get or
they have the right to ask for it.
Because Trump flipped out. Trump flipped out, or maybe I'm using that language too strongly. Maybe he didn't flip out, but he got upset that Obama was continuing to get security briefings, and he said he was going to stop it, not realizing that it's under one of the ex-president's acts that this is mandated. But anyway,
I digress. Just jealous because somebody's reading them, and he.
Anyway,
somebody.
But I just, it's an opportunity that we think about continuity while we're looking at bylaws, and it's a way to allow room for that in a way that it's just something to consider.
I think it's one of the biggest things that we really, because it is the more I thought about it, it's a real opportunity for us to protect our institutional knowledge, to keep our board members engaged, You know, they have a term limit, but if you're a public member, then you're sort of ready. If an opportunity presents itself, you can, seek reappointment. We want to make sure we don't lose anything. So the question, we can, for example, create a priority in the sense that if a board member is term limited out and opts to, seek, become a public member, for example, do they have a right? How much discretion, if any, do they have in terms of choosing what committee that they serve on?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying is you can't do it that way because there are not enough spots.
No, but I'm saying is that what I'm saying is if you have a priority in the sense that a board, if the former chair of a committee is term limited out and they want to become a public member, they can replace an existing public member. Can be said, I'm sorry, but you have to step aside in favor of this former board member because of who they were. Our bylaws provide that.
Right, and that's what I was suggesting, in that it's still at the discretion of the chair, but if you put something in, it doesn't make it a personal thing. It's saying that for the strength of the institution, there is a provision made if somebody were previously.
This is never personal. This is about the health and knowledge of the board. And that, in the sense that, we have to be creative in ways to protect that. So that,
and I'll give you a personal example of why it's important to keep somebody as a committee member. Is that since I've been chair, I've not gone to a couple of SLA meetings, not many. Just like,
wait a minute, Carter.
Or I haven't fully participated. Like last night, I didn't fully participate in the whole meeting because I was on other meetings. But in doing so, you miss the institutional knowledge of listening to the applications. And that's why it's important to have room for somebody to continue to participate so that it's ongoing, not just the past.
Well, the other thing that's in our bylaw. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and whether that's extended to other former board members and committee members, it's just something to think about. Because, think about Toby and what he caught on the water tunnel sites. We wouldn't have had those 2 water tunnel sites as parks if he hadn't physically sat on that committee and remembered that.
Yeah.
And then went back.
Those are huge.
And that's why, you want to keep that room there, because we don't have the attorneys, the hired guns, the this, the that go along.
Just have ourselves.
So let me throw something in. There's a thing in our bylaws, and maybe this is not a public member thing, but somewhere we have to address it. The former chair is supposed to be on the executive committee for 1 year, but our culture is really, it's a 2-year term. That's our culture. And so I think a former chair, the immediate former chair, should stay on the executive committee until he's replaced by another former chair. So if it's 1 year, fine. If it's 2 years, then the former chair should be immediate past chair, should stay on the executive committee until there's another immediate past chair.
Okay.
I want to add something to that language too, which is you may not agree with me, David, is that if the immediate past chair is not available,
these chairs
that it should be the chair prior to that should be able to.
You can't do without them. I know, Patricia, don't you know what I'm saying here? Guys,
boards also have all prior chairs are part of the executive committee.
I just wanted, as we're talking about this, what's really coming clear is that the whole subject of institutional knowledge is something that we have to look at throughout the bylaws, how we can add in elements so that we can preserve it based on our current reality. What you guys are talking about is certainly important. That's not necessarily a public member thing, and specifically
It's not. It's not.
got to do with our chairs and and what it may be more because of its unique features is maybe, but this whole concept is something that we should just sort of be thinking of as we work our way through various parts of the bylaws, is where can we stick that sort of thing in?
Right. I agree. It's not part of public members, but I'm not sure I'm not sure where it goes, but we have to address it.
That's what, but you know something, that's what is good about these small conversations. It comes up, and there'll be some aspects of institutional knowledge with the public, in this section. It'll come up with dealing with officers. It'll come up with dealing with, committees. It's, but it's just something that is, we keep coming back to it because we all recognize how critical it is. We are our members are our greatest asset. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll figure it out where it goes, but I just wanted to put it out there.
Okay, let's.
So what are some
executive
other
committee
one at a time,
membership
kids. I'm sorry, Katie,
of
go ahead.
past. No, I'm just of past chairs. I'm just noting the topic on the macro level.
Oh, okay.
So, were there, David, you brought up issues with public members in the past. You've taken exception. Have we talked about all those issues, whatever they are?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they are. So
I just wanted to make sure that we differentiated between an appointed member and a public member. I mean, appointed members put in a tremendous amount of time to be on the community board. And there was a time when there was a blurring of the roles of public and appointed members, and they're part of the quorum. Oh, well, they have a full vote. Oh, well, this, oh, well, that, they could carry the vote. I can't abide by public members carrying a voting committee. There has to be a differentiation between an appointed member, quite aside from the issue of accountability and conflicts of interest. A lot of committees don't have conflicts of interest. But
if 6 and 4, or if you have 6 and 3 at a committee member and the full board members are 3-3, the public members are going to carry the vote. And that's just the way it works. I mean, they can be tallied separately, but the cumulative votes, their vote is no different at the committee level than a full board member's vote.
I think that
unless we say otherwise, unless we say, yes, we will count, we will tally those votes, but the only votes that count are board members. Do we want to?
A public member vote cannot have the same weight as an appointed.
Well, that's the question. Do we want to change that standard, whereas the only votes that count in terms of the position of a committee are board member votes? We will tally both so that we can see how our public members are weighing in. But do we want to change that? Or do we want to say that, if a vote is carried due to the votes of public members, that we say, in fact, the committee doesn't have a position?
Susan, most boards do not count the public members in determining if a motion carries. They tally them separately so that people can see how the public members feel, but they do not count in determining if you have a vote in favor of a resolution.
That's
only the board members. That's the standard practice for most boards.
There. So we've been in the minority on that.
Yes.
And I would recommend it for this board. I would recommend it very strongly.
And I would second that recommendation.
I mean, personally, I don't think that public members would be offended. I mean, in the sense that they want to be heard, they want to participate, they want to be acknowledged. I don't know that would their interest be diminished in serving if, in fact, that their votes didn't count towards, the outcome in terms of a committee's position? I don't know.
My experience has been that they don't care. They just want to make sure their voice is heard in the committee for which they have asked to be a public member. They don't care.
Give you guys an example.
One at a time, guys, please.
Let's talk about an example, right? Like, just because it helps illustrate. Let's say you have an advocacy group that's involved in some committee's area, and they do a lot of work in a particular area. So your public members are maybe members of an advocacy group, as well as residents of our local community. And even though you are appointed you're representing yourself, that an issue comes up that their group is strongly advocating for, but it's skewed in one way or another. They're not appointed members of the board.
Mhm.
You know, that's an example of where you don't necessarily want to not have them involved in the committee's work, but if one of those issues were to come up, you clearly would want to know that and have it be very clear. And it's a distinction, but it's how you end up being a public member of a committee that,
Right.
you know, as opposed to appointed member, because that's where the discretion of a chair can really impact the direction of a committee, right? As opposed to the full board members.
And that's a good
That's their
distinction. That's a
point.
good example also of where you might say that a public member has a conflict of interest that isn't actually it's not a conflict of interest in terms of the conflict of interest rules that we function under, because it's not financial. They simply have they're drawn in terms of their commitment to different organizations. But we might think of it as a moral conflict or something of that sort. And it's, you know, it wouldn't even if we asked them to abide by the same conflict of interest rules that we follow, they wouldn't be in violation of that. But nevertheless, they would be, you know, not necessarily, you know, a single focus in terms of the interests of the board. So that the idea that their vote would count is, in that case, problematic.
I mean, if they're advocating for a group, you know, that we're discussing, I think that's a problem. But let me just say something. Who was it that said, would we diminish their enthusiasm to be part of the community board? Don't forget, public members could question applicants. You know, they're part of the executive or business part of the discussion. You just like come on land use, you get firsthand knowledge of the application. You could question the applicants and be part of the executive discussion afterwards. So I think there's a lot that a public member gets to see and do without their vote being, you know, necessarily the same weight as a full board member. You know? So
Right.
that's
Right.
what I would say about that.
I know. I mean, I, you know, am totally comfortable personally with the idea of saying, you know, we'll tally them separately, but they will not count towards determining what the committee's official position is on, you know, in terms of a resolution or an application. You know, that's
Right,
something,
absolutely.
and maybe that's because, you know, in the sense that since only appointed members should be the ones who weigh in on that. But I personally don't. That's why I'm asking for other people's, you know, do we agree that change is appropriate?
For me,
Yeah.
it is.
Yes, I think it
Yeah.
is appropriate.
Good. Okay. That's fine. I don't really think the public members are even going to notice it probably, but I think that
Whatever,
board members will appreciate it.
it should be memorialized in our bylaws. They've noticed it.
No, absolutely. That's exactly why I'm making a note of it. It's it is something. It has been frustrating. I have seen from time to time over the years, people have been frustrated because a committee's position was ultimately determined due to the public members voting one way and the board members being split.
So if we put this in, and in the future, they're more public members because they're former board members, you basically have taken away the weight of those votes. And it's been the idea with past chairs, David's the exception, that people have felt that all votes count, you know, on a committee, that there's not some different type of standard of member on a committee, because what a public member does not have is the opportunity to readdress the point at the full board meeting or have any power of introducing a substitute resolution or doing anything like that, whereas a full board member always has that option. So public members you know, input in power ends at the committee, but the full board members always have power over that because of what they can do later. And so the idea, if you have a, you know, like a 3-3 split vote and 3 other people, and one goes one way and one goes the other, and then one tips it as a public member, that's part of the process and the way the process goes. And so that's sort of the other side of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the only one that feels that way, Carter. You know, you made it sound.
Well, I
like
think Terry, you know, and I think Toby, I think when I talked to them in the past, but I don't know, you know, I'm just saying that's what the.
A public member's, you know, strength always lies in their ability to persuade. You know, it's, you know, they have a voice. Their voice has to be respected just as much. They have just as much right to engage in discussion, in business session, you know. So it's, you know, that's one of the prerogatives of being an appointed member, is having more of a say further down the process. I mean, we're not discriminating against somebody because of who they are. It's like, it's simply their status. It's like, you know, and I do feel that over the years, you know, there have been concerns. I don't know always that sometimes, you know, when we're in a full board meeting, do people appreciate that the outcome, you know, a committee's position was ultimately determined by the public members? Do they give that enough weight?
Your committees, you know, your committee on the quality of life committee is where that, I think, is more likely to have happened over the years, right? Than any other.
Transportation.
I've seen it. I've seen it a number of times. Now, fortunately, you know, by our nature, we reach consensus, and it's uncommon for us to have a non-unanimous vote, or even to have. But you know, over the years, if you know, seen these happen.
Yeah. I mean, I just, you know, I always, when we limit somebody's role, whoever it may be, you know, you also take away the strength when you have really good people in those roles. And so that's why I'm not necessarily disagreeing fully, but, you know, if we have really good members who are public members who are really knowledgeable or something, and they are, you know, voting on something in a particular way, and are determining the vote, you know, does that undo it because they're not creating the majority? And then how is that even recognized? You know, whatever it is that they brought up, that may not carry through in a resolution. Let's say, you know, if you have a 5-4 vote with that same 6 and 3 that I brought up, the 4 minority voters, that's the resolution coming forward, right? That is written to that, and it doesn't necessarily have to capture the other side or the other position. And so that's lost in its carrying from committee to full board. So I just bring that up as, you know, part of.
This is really inside baseball in the weeds, Carter, I have to tell you. You know,
yeah, I mean, are we really, that's the question, are we really going to, I mean, how much are you diminishing somebody's ability to participate because we do this? What we're doing is, I mean, part of it is protecting the process of, we have board members who are appointed, and it's, you know. And
they know better is what we're saying.
Yeah.
They know better when that's
not, it doesn't mean that we, you know, first, because we don't have to have public members.
No,
that's right. So in the sense that we, you know, they exist to assist and facilitate the work of the board members. So we don't want to, you know.
Well, I mean, yes and no, but I mean, you're basically strengthening the position of a patronage appointment. And because we're all patronage appointments, you know, as board members. And I just bring that up is that, you know, it's like consolidating power around that. And it's, you know, when you know, it's, I mean, the you know, people's role when they're appointed to committees generally because they're bringing something there, and that could be more than what any full board member is bringing. That's all I'm bringing
So
up.
they're
And
welcome to
Andrew
come on the-
Jones is a great example of that. And you know, it's where the nuance can be lost in the translation of coming from a committee to the full board is all I'm saying. And it can be a different outcome that isn't necessarily reflective of what happened at the committee level.
But you're only talking
Okay.
of one committee, which is quality of life that it could possibly happen in, correct? Could
Well,
they have
no,
today?
what we're envisioning is that there are a lot more public members in the future because we see people being appointed there. And so right now, when we're limiting the role of public members, we're in fact limiting the potential of people who've already participated. And why are we so concerned about limiting public members' role?
Well, what we're doing, I mean, is it fair to say we're limiting the only difference is that their votes aren't determinative if whatever for the committee's position. In terms of their functioning, they're functioning in the same way.
Sure. I mean, the way it's written now, people, when you have the vote tallied separately, people could make their own decision about how to interpret.
And maybe that's the answer. Maybe that in the sense that it's something that has to be made clearer in the sense of that, you know, and if they, or they simply say that there's no board, there's no committee position. If the result is that the majority is achieved due to the votes of a public member, then the committee doesn't have a position. You could do it that way too.
I'm hesitant to do that because then that becomes a mess of,
Somewhat.
you know, not having.
Well, Carter, if I was appointed a public member sometime in the future, which I will not be, because once I'm not going to get to my term limits, but I would understand that whatever influence I may or may not have, it's because I'm arguing a point, because I'm asking erudite questions to applicants, because I'm speaking in the business or executive session of the committee. And if someone wants to hear what I have to say, that's great. But I don't think that a public member is the same status as a full board member. I'm sorry, I don't. And I think that it's muddying the waters. And for me, I don't think it's the same. You and I, Carter, will have to agree to disagree on this. So.
I don't know. You know, it's maybe we should get some feedback. I mean, from other people on this. I don't know. Or
Listen,
we
can
just
I offer
Absolutely.
something here? Again, my feedback again is, and I have to agree with Dave on this one, is that public members are appointed because they would like their voices heard at committee meetings on a variety of subjects. But all the public members I've known for the past 10 years on this board and on Committee Board 1 never expected their vote to be counted in determining a decision for the committee nor for the community board. They served, they asked, they requested to be a public member of a specific committee. And on Committee Board 1, they were only allowed one committee, and they were there only to express their opinion to make sure that the members of the committee understood how they felt, whether they represented themselves or another organization. I've never known public members to expect their vote to count in determining the committee nor the community board's position. That's been my experience over the past 10 years.
Okay. Now here's another idea. What about the idea that, let's say we don't going forward count public member votes in terms of the committee's the outcome of the position, but a public member can participate in discussion when a resolution or, you know, is brought up. No, I'm gonna just throwing it out there.
You can't create status at a full board meeting, I don't think.
You can't?
to discuss that during an executive session, because the business session, because the business session is for the members. I mean, you can, and we outline that you can ask, I think it's outlined somewhere, right? That you can ask a clarifying question or something, but it's not to include others into the dialogue.
General discussion.
Into general discussion.
Okay.
That's I think that's an important part, you know, that's different. I mean, that's the distinction of the work that happens at the committee and the work that happens at the full board. And I guess that's, you know, in some sense, that's what David is saying, is that the work of the full board members at the committee should be carried over to the full board. And I think Michael's saying that as well. And I guess that I'm not making a distinction. I'm allowing for the room that there's more other people are involved in that committee level, that it's a funnel up, you know, that some people go up in the discussion, but not everybody. And
Right.
I think Michael and David are looking at it as much more absolute, and that the work of board members at the committee level, you can include others in the discussion, but they're not.
Well, you know, full board members have a lot more responsibility than a public member. We have to go to 2 committees, full board. We're all on working groups. We're all on this, we're all on that, we're all on this. You know, we put a lot of time in the community.
I'm glad you think that way.
Why?
That's not necessarily.
Try to control yourself.
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, there is something to be said for the idea of, you know, board members voting on the committee level, and then they are there to continue the discussion when it's presented to the full board.
You know, in just sort of in putting that context, just I'm beginning to see a little bit more with Michael and David, and agreeing to that based on the fact that how it's brought up to the full board.
Yeah,
You know,
I think
and
that
there's
I think that's
room for
important.
more discussion of others at the committee level, but you know,
Well, the reso will certainly reflect if, you know, the votes of the public members, you know, just tally separately. So
it's supposed to now.
it's
Also,
supposed-
the public members
not in
can
our
speak,
bylaws though, is it?
the public members can speak in public session at the full board meeting without
Of course they can.
participating in the business session. So they
course they
do
can.
have a second outlet at the full board meeting if they have an opinion to express.
You know, and a public member, you know, I mean, can be, if they can't participate in business session, by being present, they can be called on for clarification. You know, it's like, it is, you make yourself available through your relationships with the board members. You know, I mean, this is something, you know, we don't have to make a decision on this right now. It's just something though that we should be starting to, you know, consider.
One of the
I
other
just
items.
wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
I mean, I still want to, I think one of the things we're trying to do is look through the lens of the term limit issue. So we get to year 8, and nope, Donna Raftery has to go off. She's chair of the SLA. She has all that knowledge. We don't take public members on the SLA.
Well, now we can.
We can always take members.
Well, that's by policy. You know, we haven't been taking members. So what do we want to do? I'm using her as an example just because, you know, that's such a key.
Well, we're sort of jumping around in
Yeah,
a sense of, I don't want to jump around too much between the idea of how we're counting. They're related, but we, you know, in sense of how we recognize the input or the votes of a public member versus simply retaining our former board members. They're related, but they're not quite the same thing in the sense that we can make specific provisions in terms of preferences for former board members, you know,
Didn't we?
I mean,
I'm
that's,
just trying to think, make sure that
yeah.
whatever we do, we got that in mind too.
Katie brings up a good point, because that also, you know, as much as you can mentor somebody, you know, when you through something, you also want to be there for some point after the fact. And it, you know, that's a part of that transition is ensuring there's a role. So it's less of a choice. So in that case, Donna would be there. So you don't want to make it like it's a big deal that she has to go and ask somebody. You want to set it up where that transition is there, not dissimilar to the way you have the chair emeritus or whatever, you know, the last chair is
I
on the
agree with that.
executive.
Bob. I agree with that.
You know, that's,
Yeah.
Well, it also
that's
shows,
something, and we also, in going along with that, we also need to change the cycle of a appointment of public members to match the cycle of the regular board members, so that transition can happen, you know, the same end of March to April 1st.
Yeah, because it's now on
Because
January.
you wouldn't be able to, let's say if you had too many public members, you wouldn't be able to make a new selection from having everybody reapply.
that's right.
So to match that, you'd have to do that. And I don't think that's a big deal, but you know.
Right.
Susan,
So
didn't
we have
just,
to keep all these things in mind.
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
Didn't we just discuss that public members, you know, will have a list of criteria to be a public member and conflicts of interest and stuff, which would answer the SLA objection, I would think. Isn't that what we just discussed at the beginning of the meeting?
Well, I don't, you know, I think that the conflicts is already in the bylaws of abiding by that. We're
It
just
has to be-
shifting it to be more affirmative.
That's what we discussed.
It has to be beefed up.
Right.
I think we have
It's
to
sign an affidavit
be
that they
more explicit, make it more, you know, an affirmative commitment on the part of our things. We also, the idea of creating a set of suggested criteria for when you consider somebody, and also the idea of showing preference for former board members, especially recently, you know, people who've been term limited out. These are, you know,
So
yeah,
there's
to
some
work on.
conflict in what you guys are throwing out, in that public members are appointed right now at the sole discretion of the chair, right? If you start talking about criteria and this and that, it changes that. What it should be is that the chair has the
that does,
ability to
no,
put
no,
forward.
Carter, it doesn't, I'm not saying these are compulsory criteria. I'm
Oh,
saying.
no, I'm saying that the criteria should be laid out by the chair, not by,
Why?
well, because it's at the discretion of the chair who's appointed.
No, I don't think that we have to have different criteria. I mean, we change chairs every 2
It's
years.
like the concept of
No, but
advising.
David, you
It
just
doesn't mean
brought
we
up
have,
that
you have to
wanna-
agree with it. It means that it exists so that you don't have, it doesn't appear totally subjective, is that you're relying on something.
Well, no, I mean, you may have a chair who comes along with the philosophy that they want to have every single public member slot filled, and they're going to do that. And as opposed to where David said, hold on a second, I don't want to miss this one guy and make an exception. You can't really lay out criteria. You know, it should be really, whoever the current chair is, they may tweak something. Maybe you come up with a starting point, but if it's ultimately up to them to make the decision, then, and they can make exceptions, they should just start off with whatever the base is, because then you're taking away that discretion. I mean,
I don't see that, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I maybe the word criteria is not the right word,
Guidelines.
in the sense that these are points of consideration.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's fair. I mean,
I'm not saying, we're not attempting to, you know, subvert the, you know, the ultimate power to make the choice. We're simply saying that there are criteria here, and that sometimes, you know, it's like, yes, you have somebody who may not have expertise but has demonstrated commitment. On the other hand, you have somebody who's got expertise. On the third hand, you've got somebody who's got past service. You know, these are all just points of consideration, and that it helps people know that, there are many paths to service.
I don't disagree, but one of the things is if you outline too much and somebody says, hey, I meet all this, it becomes I meet all this, therefore I should be. And
No, it doesn't. It does. It all
I'm
depends
just-
on how you word it, Carter. I'm sorry, but
no, but that's what I was saying is that when you say criteria,
well,
somebody
that's why I said
says,
maybe
I meet all the
criteria
criteria.
maybe criteria is not the right word here. What I'm saying to you is in the sense that and ultimately we don't change the fact that the final decision is the chair's decision.
I just
So
simply
anyone
said
who
that
were
the
to
chair
say
could
that were
waiver,
to go,
something in an exceptional case where, they don't go to 3 meetings and, we need to get somebody who's an environmental engineer, who wants to participate and when issues are coming up, the chair could waiver and say, okay, I could appoint somebody. That's what I was saying. The chair still has a lot of power, but I think what Susan is saying is we need to have some guidelines and some.
So one of the things is that
what you're
right
saying,
now
Susan?
is that you don't have to explain yourself. And one of the things, David, there was a circumstance that you had where you decided to make a leadership change in the board, and you're not required to explain yourself when you do that as chair. And when you put forward too many reasonings, it creates a bit of a more complicated situation.
are you suggesting that the 3 or 4 things that we've been discussing are too many?
No. I'm just saying that that to get to, the outline of that. I mean, that's why I'm just saying that if you come up with some criteria, it should just be generally you're assuming somebody who's elected by the board is going to make
I
good
think you're
decisions.
reading into this something that's just not there in this case. It's like, and this is our first pass at this, so let's not get, over. I mean, we're dealing with a bunch of ideas that are all sort of circulating around the general topic of public members, and it shows us just how much there is here to sort of parse out in terms of the different concerns that we have. But yeah, nobody's trying to reduce the authority or discretion.
And
I agree.
I'm not comfortable discussing sort of the examples that are in front of me right now, but I can tell you that the examples are very real. And that's why I just bring this up, because I think, to David's point, what you need to do, and who's qualified, who's not. And when you throw out too many things, it becomes even more complicated to accomplish that. So that's
Absolutely.
why I just put that.
But we also have situations where people aren't focused just on qualifications or just on the needs. That's the sort of the burden of taking a long-term position, is that we're sort of working our way between, yes, somebody who's only thinking about the needs of a committee versus someone who is like, oh yeah, I like you, I don't like you.
Well, I mean, there are situations, and I'm glad that we're thinking about it and talking it through, because there have been situations in the past when the board, and Carter talks about this, when the board was much more political, and there were people who were running for higher office off our board, and a lot of funny things happened. There were opportunities and people took advantage of them. And I think we have to think about that too. Right now, we've been very fortunate that it hasn't been as political.
Yeah, we've had little sub-cabals on the board.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
CB8
but,
has
I mean,
2 members running for office.
And
the days of the formation of the Hudson River Park were an absolute nightmare on the board. I wasn't on the board, but we could see it from the community. So
yeah,
it was a very messy time.
Yeah,
and it was crazy when what's her name was borough president.
Virginia
Fields,
and the Barbernello years and stuff like that. It was like the Wild West of community board. I mean,
very
difficult.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Don't
a,
worry.
I think, you know, I think
clarifying
about that.
question. Are you gonna,
Absolutely.
Susan, are you gonna include that a public member has to attend 3 meetings in order to keep, you're not?
This is, as I said, those types of
Be discretion. to
points
the
of
chairman.
consideration are not bylaws. These are the kinds, we're talking about them where there's sort of ways to, maybe gauge somebody's interest. This is definitely not, these are not bylaws things. This might be something, that we generate in an ancillary, as an ancillary, suggestions. Of course, never to subvert the authority of a chair to make these decisions, but it also is a way to show people, it's like, if you're interested, you've got to be serious. We don't want you to just show up and say your thing and move on. It's like, this is for, these kind of positions are for people who are making long-term commitments, just the way appointed members make long-term commitments. So it has that value to it too. But no, we're not. That's the short answer.
I mean, maybe the answer is that they have to put forward a similar, go through a similar process of what it takes to become a full board member, except targeted to the committee, where they would have to put forward, talk about, whatever, you got to write a paragraph or 2
Someone
about
could-
why you want to join. That's a very real way of doing
Absolutely.
that.
Someone could submit
Absolutely
a statement of intention. Somebody could, discuss why this is of particular relevance to them. Whatever.
I thought we had that. We don't have that anymore. I thought we
have
used to have
something, but it's not very, it doesn't ask a lot, and it was something that's been worked on. I think David and then Terry and for Toby. I mean, it's just a short little questionnaire, but it doesn't, you got to really, it's like, what groups are you a member of? Oh, and it doesn't, it's like, great. It doesn't tell you anything or afford any kind of information into somebody. Whereas I think that the process of what we, submit is to become a board member gives a little bit, you have to write something about why you're interested, and you can do it in whatever way you want. And that's sort of the point. But you're doing.
And also, I mean, the reappointment process, I mean, the public members are reappointed annually, but now, in the reappointment process through the borough president, I think it's become better under Gail. We have to talk about, our committee
Issues.
work and the way, some of our more concrete contributions to the board and the life of the board. And that can also be helpful for people to be reflecting on what they've done, what the public members could reflect on what they've done the last year.
I will tell you what.
But someone has to read it, then the chair has to read it, so I understand that.
I would say what would be more helpful is actually reasons that somebody can't stay on committee as a public member. And so, for example, I think in the bylaws, there should be a minimal attendance requirement.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And so that somebody's just, boom, you're off. You can always reapply, but it's automatic that you're off. And that would, that would have made a situation of dealing with some of the quality of life appointees much easier. Is that some were going through health issues and weren't coming for a long time, and then we're coming again, and it becomes uncomfortable as a chair that somebody's kind of de facto there.
Right.
And if you have a process where you have to,
and what's more important is that they now hold a place that you could then offer to
That's right.
somebody who's active. It's,
That's right.
I don't want to push somebody aside because their health prevents them from serving. But if we have a limited number, we need to have people who can actively contribute.
I mean,
well, so they could reapply annually, and then, why we should offer people, as I know I've had to deal with this, like a medical leave or something too. Say, well,
that's an exception that can be made, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that Arthur had any medical leaves when he just didn't show up for stuff. And, he didn't
Well.
show up for 3 years.
No, as opposed to, you're perfectly right, Claude, as opposed to Ed Gold, who had real medical,
Right. And
Right now, I've
but I
got.
just bring that up is that there should have been automatic that you're out. And,
Right.
and that's what Gail requests the attendance of the board members for all the committee meetings. And that's the right approach. If
I greatly resented the
Yeah.
fact that Arthur stayed on the board as long as he did, and he didn't show up.
Well, he
I
was always
personally-
late to every meeting he came to
When
anyway.
he did show up, and it
I'm
was
just
like,
saying he just wasn't there, and that was somebody else, could have been some other board member who really wanted to participate.
and what
and-
it's saying is that he's there for political reasons.
So,
it's-
so I think,
But that was not but now we're talking about full board, right? With him? What are we
Yeah,
talking
no,
about?
what I'm talking about is the public members, there should be a requirement that they need to attend 80% of,
Give- A good example, and sadly, she just passed away, was Ellen Peterson Lewis.
Peterson Lewis.
Longtime member. When she was very engaged, she was deeply concerned. She always had good things to contribute, but her health in the end prevented her from showing up. But and nobody wanted to say, oh, we can't continue to count you as a member. But that also meant that we couldn't offer the slot to somebody who could show up.
well, we also had the uncomfortable position that we were out of balance on the Quality of Life Committee because we actually had 6 public members we were violating the bylaws, but
We have to,
everybody,
that has to be
because
fixed,
of the
yeah.
health issues of a number of the public members, they would never be there. But it should be that you have to actively seek that kind of waiver, not that it's just given,
Granted.
so that after 2 years of that, you can say maybe we need to
reevaluate.
I'm just saying that you can always make an exception, but it should be in the rules that if you're not there, you're out unless you've got a reason. Sorry, that should just be what it is.
I agree.
You don't need
I
to
agree.
talk about it. You're gone unless you've got a reason. If we had board members who just didn't show up, I don't really care what, it's like you need to be coming to us to stay on, not the other way around.
And we use a standard for public members of no more than 2 absences per appointment year. It would be so clear to the public members what their responsibility is.
Sure. And let somebody seek, let them seek an exception, which again would be ultimately, since the chair has the discretion, if somebody said, oh yeah, you're missing 3 because of a health reason, and it's like, we don't want to lose you. Sure. That's what discretion is for. But you're right. When you set certain boundaries, it helps separate out the committed from the not committed.
And just to put in perspective, I think that what I had said, 80% of the meetings is actually what Michael had said, which is 2 absences a year, because we don't generally meet in August, and usually most committees are off some other time. So that's a good start. That's a good place to be, and go from there. But that's
right.
If somebody
Okay, I have to hop off.
misses 4 meetings.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this up.
We're going to come to an
wrap this up because we're approaching an hour and a half. But some really good ideas, guys. We'll think about more things. Any ideas connected to public members for our next meeting, which is, I think, the day before the full board meeting. I forget what we've got. We've got a second meeting this month. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any last comments?
Wait, I'm just checking that date. What date do you think it is? The 16th?
16th, 17th, something like that?
16.
The 17th is full board.
Oh, then it's the 16th.
Okay. I'll
'Cause
put it in.
If I can see you twice a month, why should I give up that opportunity? Only once
You
a
think
month.
it's 6:30, Susan?
Huh?
You think it's 6:30, Susan? You think it's
That's
6:30?
6:30. That one is 6:30. Yeah, because we're the only.
Okay, it's in my book.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Take care, everyone. Thank you. Nice
Thanks,
to
Katie. If we're
be
gonna,
together.
whenever you're ready to end the meeting, I want to just end the meeting. But if Patricia and Susan, if you guys can stay on because you were on the meeting last night, I just want to talk to you. I'm going to stop recording everything whenever you're ready to. I don't want to.
So Michael and David, if you don't have anything else that you want to, I think I'm going to wrap it up. It's already 6:25, which
Okay.
is kind of at our limit. So just think public member thoughts and email whatever. And I'll
Okay. Thank
Carter,
you.
do you need me for a minute?
Good night.
No,
Katie, if you want to stick around, yeah. So, all right. So we're
Just for
finishing.
another, yeah, for a couple
And I'm
minutes.
going to leave. See
Thank
all.
you,
You can stay if
David.
you want.
Talk to you
I'm
later.
so the meeting's ending. Stop the recording.